Some doctors have raised important medical questions about Dr. Kelly's death that remain unanswered. The coroner, the pathologist and the toxicologist to the Hutton inquiry declined our invitation to speak to this programme. So what do other forensic experts make of those doubts? Dr. Alan Anscombe is the president of the British Association in Forensic Medicine, a forensic pathologist with over 20 years' experience who has performed several thousand autopsies. We put to him the point made by vascular surgeon John Skerr.
I don't believe that simply cutting an ulnar artery will cause death.
Forensic pathologists are biased in terms of seeing what people actually die from. Clinicians, by and large, the vast majority of their patients don't die. We approach things from a different way and actually see what people really die from. You might argue we don't see what people survive. So I'm quite happy to accept that often severed small to medium-sized arteries, such as ulnar artery, are not fatal. But severance of such an artery can and is occasionally fatal. And if you combine that with somebody who is deceased, then you tend to put two and two together.
The paramedics say they didn't see much blood at the scene. Is there any way to establish if Dr. Kelly had lost enough blood to have died from hemorrhaging?
The actual volume of blood, given that the person is deceased, is likely to be fatal, whatever that volume of blood happens to be. There is not a simple volume which is always fatal and a simple volume which is not. It depends on the rate of bleeding, it depends on your physical condition before you're bleeding and whilst you're bleeding. It depends on a number of factors.
It's also suggested that up to 5 pints of blood need to be lost in order to cause death. And the pathologist who conducted the post-mortem on Dr. Kelly in Oxford should have measured the amount of blood lost, or the amount remaining.
There's no simple test to measure the remaining amount of blood in the circulation in a dead body. It'd be nice if it was possible, but unfortunately it's not.
Skeptics suggest that coproximal couldn't have been a factor in Dr. Kelly's death because the toxicologist to the Hutton inquiry said that the concentrations of coproximal found in Dr. Kelly were less than is usually fatal.
There was a third of what's normally a fatal amount in his blood.
Professor Alistair Hay believes the evidence of the toxicologist at the Hutton inquiry wasn't as detailed as it could have been.
I think it would have helped if he had said that if you look at deaths involving coproximal, that there is a range of concentrations that you will find in people, ranging from about a quarter of the value that was found in David to, in the case of the one drug, propoxyphene, almost 40 times as much as was in David. And so you've got that range, and David would sit in that range, but albeit at the lower end. But it would still give you a measure of reassurance that this sort of level is what you would find in people who have committed suicide.
Professor Robert Forrest is Britain's leading forensic toxicologist and the president of the Forensic Science Society. He points out that coproximal has been used in many suicides.
At one stage, it was accounting for about 10% of the cases of fatal overdose that we saw. The numbers have dropped off dramatically in the last few years, and this is because it has been decided that it will no longer be a licensed preparation available on prescription.
The Hutton inquiry's toxicologist said that the concentrations of coproximal found in Dr. Kelly's blood were lower than the levels that are usually fatal.
The concentrations in Dr. Kelly's blood are on the low side. We normally see higher concentrations than that in a person who has died of an overdose of coproximal. But if you've got heart disease and if there's something else going on like blood loss, then all three of those are going to act together: the overdose of coproximal, the heart disease and the blood loss. I've got no doubt that the cause of Dr. Kelly's death was a combination of blood loss, heart disease and overdose of coproximol. Not necessarily in that order. If I was going to put it in order, I'd put the overdose of coproximol first. But it's important that all of them have interacted to lead to the death.